Hey everyone, my name's Stan Bicknell and welcome to this week's episode of Rhythmically Caffeinated. I wanted to do something a little bit different this week. So some of you may know that over at masterminddrummer.com I write weekly newsletters and I touch on topics such as creativity, progress, mindset, how to develop yourself on and off the drums. And what I wanted to do this week was actually dive into one of the first newsletters that I wrote, and it's on the topic of guarding your creativity at all costs, which is a really important topic for me. So let's dive in. All right, before we kick this off, let's lay some drums down and get a nice little rhythmic motif happening that I can just sort of loop and put underneath this episode. So, guarding your creativity at all costs. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm 39 years old, literally on the cusp of turning 40. I've been playing for 27 years now. I've been teaching for over 22. And within all that time, there are now two things that I'm most certain of. So number one, my desire to play the drums, so my eagerness to sit down, is 100% the most important thing to me. And I think of my desire to play the drums as something that I manage, not something that's feeling based or that I'm waiting to happen. And number two, my only gift or talent that I have, I believe, is my love for the craft. So I truly believe that my only talent is my obsession, and I am really obsessed. But yeah, I believe that obsession equals talent, not the traditional way that we think of talent. And I'm actually pretty damn grateful for that. And what's crazy is that my eagerness to sit down on the drums, so my desire to sit down and log 2 to 3 hours a day, which I do. I could be working on anything from material for an artist that I'm working with. I've got some tours coming up, recordings, could be anything. But my eagerness to sit down and log those hours after all this time is actually stronger than it's ever been. And to be honest, the hardest thing that I'm finding is actually getting off the drums. So I've got other things that I have to do in my life. I've got family, I've got other commitments. But when I sit down and I lock in, it's actually really hard to get off. And I find myself thinking, how the hell have I maintained that after all this time? A lot of my peers who I came up with on instruments, they don't lock in like that anymore. If anything, their responsibilities, family, kids, work, Netflix, all these things have kind of contributed to them falling off. But I haven't locked into that at all. I've just maintained and sustained the whole way through. And then I find myself thinking, shouldn't I be powering down? Shouldn't I be struggling to find time? I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got animals, I've got a business, I've got Netflix, but I'm not struggling to find time. But I do hear that attitude all the time. I mean, I teach people who are struggling to find their motivation and desire. I just see it a lot online and just in general, like I said, over the years, I've seen a lot of people fall away from pursuing their craft, pursuing their mastery of their instrument. And I've realized in simple terms, I'm just not like everyone else. In a lot of ways, I'm just not like everyone else. I really don't put anything else in front of, when it comes to my personal journey, everything is sort of built around the idea of my personal mastery, my own desire for the love of the craft and trying to get better at the craft. That's all I'm trying to do here. Within any given day, all I'm trying to do is get better at my instrument, and everything else around that is sort of a byproduct. So what did I do different? What did I do that after all this time, I was able to sustain and maintain my desire and my eagerness to play? So I've found that over the years, pursuing a creative outlet is a fine line balance between the have to do's and the want to do's. So what I mean by that is balancing the things that you have to do on the drums, band, work, or whatever, with the things that you want to do on the drums. And if those two things are out of balance, then everything falls away. It's imperative that you have those things dialed in. Let me explain a little bit more. So, have-to-dos are for me things like a covers band that you're in, a wedding that you agreed to playing at, a student that you took on that maybe you didn't want to, maybe you've got too many students. These are things that you have to do. It could be a session for an artist that you're not really into the material, you're just doing it for the money. These are the have-to-dos. These are the things that you don't love doing it, but you're required to do it. Whereas the want-to-dos are the things that you actually signed up for when you came into drumming, when you decided that this was your creative outlet. So want to do's are things like developing your speed, developing your chops, developing your facility, developing your single kick, your dynamics, anything that you're interested in on the kit that gives you that willingness to sit down and spend hours working on it. Those are the want to do's. So the balance between these two things will literally dictate on a weekly basis whether you're either draining your creativity pool or you're filling it up. So the creativity pool was an analogy that I came up with a few years ago, and it was basically a way for me to explain how every week I've got a full pool of creativity, and it's about where I choose to put that energy that will dictate how fast the pool drains and where it's draining to. So teaching, covers, sessions, gigs, practice, all of these all drain from the same creativity pool. You cannot compartmentalize, or you cannot drain from aspects of this pool without affecting all of your creativity energy that you basically get at the start of each week. So say you've got a roster of 30 students. As the week progresses, your desire to sit down after you've taught for the day and work on the things that you want to work on, the creative things that you want to work on, diminishes as the week rolls out and as you work through more students, because you're literally using that same amount of energy, your creativity pool, for teaching as well. You cannot separate these two things. So how do I know of this example specifically? How do I know how teaching specifically can drain your creativity pool? Well, firstly, because over the last few years, my teaching has sort of progressed in a way where I've done all types of teaching. I've done beginner, intermediate, advanced. I've taught at schools. I've taught at tertiary education institutions. I've done everything. And these days, I'm actually finding that on top of the specialized teaching that I do, so the stuff that's within my wheelhouse, I actually just teach a lot of teachers in general. So I'm teaching teachers. And this is a common thing that I'm finding with pretty much every single teacher that comes through the door. They don't have any desire to play. And then I should add too that as a teacher, I've also been through this myself. So for me in this journey, what I've realized over the last few years is that my love for the craft, my desire to play, my desire to sit down and log hour after hour after hour, still even at this point, that is my only superpower here. It's not how I play the drums that's important. It's my desire to sit down and be creative. That's the most important thing. That's all I've got. And honestly, I honestly feel like I'm at the point where it's like I am guarding that at all costs. So how do I do that? How, after 27 years, do I protect my creative energy? Well, I honestly think that's a very personal question because everyone's different. You've got to ask yourself, when you sit behind the drums, what fuels you when you play the drums and what drains you when you play the drums. And I've done a lot of beta testing with this over the years because I also believe that you should say yes to everything before you know what you want to say no to. So in my case, it's quite simple. I'll start off with teaching, and I will say at the top of this that I truly believe to be a good teacher, you need to be a student first. So I think that teaching is a byproduct of being a student to the craft at all times. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a great teacher necessarily. It's just one part of it because not everyone that can play can teach. But I do think that all good teachers sustain their desire to pursue the craft. They stay hungry. They stay a student of the craft. So that's the first thing. But I've also realized that with my teaching in recent years, I really enjoy teaching, but as long as it's in my wheelhouse, and I don't even mean within my safety zone. I mean more like I'm teaching things that I'm interested in. I'm really not interested in teaching things that I don't have a desire to discover and learn about myself. I've found that if I lean too much into that commodity style teaching, so beginners and whatnot, I just don't get much joy from that. And that's a personal thing. I know plenty of really good drummers who actually get a lot of joy out of teaching beginners. But that's the key here, right? It's about identifying what works for you. Okay, number 2, I don't play in covers bands. I have played in covers bands. When I was 18, I was a full-time drummer between teaching and covers bands work. And I was in a very popular covers band at the time. We were playing 3 or 4 nights a week. And I just found that coupled with the original band that I had at the time, they were a major conflict. So I would go to my original band rehearsals and I was just sort of struggling to come up with ideas, which had never been a problem before. And I realized in that moment that it was all the energy and time that I was putting into covers bands. So, 40 songs, 4 sets of 10 tracks of all the sort of current hot songs at the time. It was just killing me. I just couldn't do it. So that's basically a no-go for me now. Now, look, there is the odd occasion that I will get together with some friends and we'll put together a covers thing for whatever, but it's just not something that I do on a regular basis because I've noticed that if I do it consistently, that's when it becomes a problem. And then number 3, session work. So I do love doing session work. I actually consider myself a session drummer within my skill set, I suppose. I'm definitely not like a wide-ranging session drummer, but within the session work that I do, I just need to feel connected to it. I need to feel fulfilled from it. I can't just be doing it for the money or for no reason at all. Like I actually have to feel like I have something that my sound, my voice and my playing actually has something to contribute to it first. Essentially what I mean is that I'm not after every gig, I'm just after the gigs that really suit my style. It's interesting being a professional creative because those two things, professional, creative, almost are a little bit of a dichotomy, right? They kind of seem like opposing magnets, commoditizing your creative outlet. I mean, we come into this to be creative and then we build it up to a point where we can commoditize it. And that just seems like a major conflict of interest to me. And then I made this really interesting realization a few years back. So generally speaking, we spend the first 10 years of our creative outlet in what I call skill acquisition. So, and you'll know this, do you remember when you were younger, and it doesn't matter what it is, photography, drumming, painting, I don't really care. Whatever your creative outlet is, you spend the first 10 years doing everything in your damnedest, gain and acquire as many skills as you possibly can. And then what we do is for the second 10 years, we try and start charging for it, because we want to be professional. All those skills that we've acquired, we now want to charge for it. But what you'll find is the things that you can charge for tend to be the things that aren't the most creatively fulfilling, right? So covers, teaching, like I've mentioned. So what starts to happen, and this is the turning point, is we start to become very unfulfilled on the instrument or through that creative outlet. And then you'll find that in the next 10 years, so the third lot of 10 years, and I deal with so many people in this window, they're just trying to find their desire to play again. They're just trying to find a willingness to sit down and want to get better. They do still want to get better, but they just don't have anything in them anymore. And they haven't really connected the dots that maybe being a professional isn't really what it's cut out to be when it comes to sustaining your creative energy towards the instrument. Now look, I'm speaking in extremes here and it may not be as visceral as what I'm making it out, but everyone that has some sort of creative outlet has definitely experienced their own version of draining their creativity pool. So then we've got to start to think, what can we do? What can we do this far down the track to maybe get the train back on the tracks or the creative pool full again and actually sustain it more? Well, look, if we're speaking in terms of analogies or metaphors or whatever, we can do what's called what I like to call a creativity stock take. So essentially, we just got to go through everything that we're applying. Any moment that you touch the sticks, if that's what we're talking about here, because this can really be applied to any creative outlet. But any time that you pick up the sticks, is it something that you're fueling from or you're draining from? So are you teaching too much? Are you playing in too many covers bands? Are you playing in original projects that don't really fulfill you? Is your practice corner in your room not inspiring? I mean, all these things contribute to it. So you've got to do a proper creativity stock take and work out what is what, essentially. And I've actually got an amazing story about this that I wrote in a later newsletter, and I will talk about it here at some point. But it was about this very thing where I had a student that was dealing with all of these issues this far down the track, and on paper, everything looked awesome, but they were just rinsed, man. They just did not have any desire to move forward on the instrument, and it really bummed them out. And so what we did for them was a creativity stock take, and we realized a few things. Now, I won't get into it here, but my point is that this is a really, really effective process to figure out what's working for you and what's not when it comes to maintaining your creativity, because your desire to play, as I mentioned time and time again, should be the most important thing to you. And look, I know this is going to be a hard pill to swallow for some people, because what this may mean is that you might have to make some pretty big choices or make some pretty big decisions. I mean, if half of your income comes from 2 covers bands that you play in, yet those are the 2 things that are sucking the juices out of you, like literally rinsing you dry, you're going to have to look whether that's worth it. And that's the personal question here, right? That's the journey. It's like, does the lifestyle that you've got used to, that you've built up over this time through those covers bands, outweigh your desire to pursue mastery of the craft? Does the money outweigh the creativity. And for me, it doesn't. And I know this because honestly, and I talked to Thomas Pridgeon about this. He and I talk offline, and one thing that he and I differ on is that I am really just driven by getting better on the instrument. That's it. I actually really enjoy just sitting down and working on the things within drumming that interest me. I'm not a master of anything. I'm not, I can tell you a million holes within my playing. That's not my point. My point is that all I am interested in is getting better on my instrument within the time that I've got. That's what drives me. I'm very, very happy and content to sit on the practice pad or in the room for hours on my own and just work away on things. I find it very meditative. I find it very calming, and I just get a lot of joy from it. Whereas Thomas is the complete opposite. He gets all of his joy from playing with people. And I love playing with people too. I mean, I've been playing with in bands for 27 years. But I just enjoy the process of getting better. That's my driver. And whereas Thomas is like, he just enjoys playing with people, right? That's the biggest driver for him. So like I say, this is a personal thing. You need to figure out what your drivers are for your creative outlet. And then you need to weigh up whether those things are working for you or they're not. And I've done a lot of that. I've done creativity stock take countless times in my drumming. And I always come back to the same place, that as long as I have the desire to play on a daily basis, and look, there are days where I'm tired or whatever. I mean, I've got a newborn at the moment. Well, he's not newborn now. He's 7 months old, and we've had some pretty sleepless nights where I sort of wake up like the Walking Dead. I'm not talking about that sort of desire, like you're just exhausted. I'm talking about, do I still care about this instrument? Do I still care about my own personal pursuit of mastery? That is the most important thing to me. And I really think that more people need to think about that and do a little bit of a deep dive within themselves. And you just got to ask yourself, are you guarding your creativity at all costs? And is that even important to you? I don't know, but it's a really cool talking point. I think it's super interesting. I love talking about this sort of stuff. Let me know your thoughts, comment down below, and thanks for tuning in. And if you made it to the end, cheers. Oh, I thought I'd say too, right at the end here, that if these sort of topics interest you, if these sort of conversations interest you, I do write a weekly newsletter on this stuff, and I love getting responses from my subscribers through that newsletter. So you can subscribe to this newsletter over at masterminddrummer.com. And I've also got a couple of courses up there with more to come. So the key to double stroke mastery, so dialing in your doubles, which I think everyone needs to work on. And then I've just released my latest course, the key to tuning a modern drum kit. So super easy ways to make your drums sound like $1 million. But yeah, thanks for your time, and I'll see you at the next one.